Hello and welcome to Triple Takeover, the fortnightly podcast that talks about Transformers and other vintage and related toy lines. On episode 7, we're talking about completism. Your hosts are, as always, Liam from Toybox Soapbox.
Nanu.
And Sixo from Sixo.
Hello indeed.
So, chaps, how are you doing?
Very good, thank you. All right, lots of people having parties outside. As you can hear my dog, she's having a fun time trying to join in.
Yeah, all good here too. No real parties going on outside, as far as I'm aware, but just the old podcasting party going on in here. So
this is the place to be. This.
Oh, absolutely! It's banging, mate. What can I say?
VIP event.
We've recently been described as grown men talking about tidying up. So I guess we've got a standard to meet, haven't we?
That's the party vibe smashed.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, tidy up party.
Yeah, 1 minute we're cool, hip, having the banging party, no hats, no trainers. Next, it's like, oh yeah, where's the Hoover? Get your duster out.
Yeah,
yeah. It was like one of those "I'm in this picture and I don't like it" moments, wasn't it? Feel severely called out, but can't really argue with it. So.
The Transformers will return after these messages.
All right, so this week we're looking at completism. So while this may not be a concept that's familiar to all collectors, I kind of feel like it's something that tempts all collectors, and even if they're aware of it or not, they can sort of end up on this road. But for those who aren't familiar, I figured we could start by asking each other, what do you think of when you hear the term completism when it comes to toy collecting?
Well, I guess it's a fairly common thing, as you say. It's the desire or the pull, maybe. I don't know if I think for some people it's a want, like it's a set out thing, like I want to complete. For some people, it's definitely not that. It's more of a pull, like almost that they have no control over, but I guess we'll get into that, to collect absolutely every single toy in a particular line or, subline or whatever it may be. It might just be a very small set of toys. It might be a larger set, like the whole of G1 or whatever. But it's that need or desire to have absolutely everything to whatever level.
Liam, what does it mean to you?
To me, I think it's more of a perspective, isn't it? It's... I suppose there are different ways. There are, like Sixo just said, it is complete, either collecting everything, or it's how you define it for yourself, for your own collection. It's, do I just collect, say, the G1 cartoon crew rather than all of the toys that are released? And I think you kind of it's how you focus your collection, and then you complete it based on that, I suppose.
I wonder if you can even use the word focus when it comes to completism if you're just collecting everything. Because, it's like, surely it's the opposite of focus.
I think so.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
I get what you mean if it's like one subline. You focus on G1 cars or you focus on headmasters. But if it's everything, I think that's total opposite.
But if you set out with a specific goal of what you want your collection to be, say if you're like, I'm going to collect all of the G1 Arc crew, for example, and then you buy the toys for that to fit and complete that line, don't you? It's not it doesn't have to be a specific toy line, I suppose, for some people in terms of completism.
I agree with that, but I think I give a nod to what Maz was saying as well. I think that shows an element of focus of like, I'm only going to collect these specific characters, or like, I don't know, people might say, like Masterpiece, I'm just going to get the cartoon ones, not the Diaclone or the toy ones or whatever. And that shows a bit of focus. It's still completionism in a way, because it's still like, I want my lineup to be complete, but it's at least focused in some way.
Aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. I guess when I think of completionism or completism or whatever you want to call it, I think of that lack of focus. Actually, it's sort of not that it implies a lack of focus to me. I'm not saying it in a bad way, but to me, it more implies just going at it, just getting absolutely everything. Like a Masterpiece completionist would get everything, all of the every single toy, Diaclone, everything, They would get, all of the stands and the little things as well. That, like, there's that coronation gear set that's coming up with the new set of Seekers. If you've not seen that, it's like a mail away thing. You would have to have that as well to really be a completionist. And we've known some of those people along the way as well, that, I'm thinking of one in particular that really kind of go out of their way with Masterpiece, actually, to make sure. I've seen people that have to, like Rodimus is a good example, MP9 Rodimus, because that was obviously a 2010 Takara 2010 release, and there were various bits of bump that came with that. There was a little stand that he could go with that was a mail away item that had to kind of collect the robot points for. There was a bag that came with it as well, that had I think it had the flame emblem on it. I can't remember offhand. I'd need to see a picture of it. There was also a box that he could go in, like a display box thing as well. And all of these were kind of separate items that you could get. And I know of collectors that have to have all of those items to kind of consider their Masterpiece collection complete. Whereas some people would just having MP9, that would be fine for them, obviously. So I think there are degrees of it, definitely. But I guess when I think of completionism or completism, I think of the people that really go, like balls to the wall with it. They really kind of just, all bets are off. There's no like holding them back. They're just like, every toy will be in their possession.
When he was talking about that, Liam, and I hope, Liam, you're the only one who can hear me here. I was pretty sure he was talking about himself. Is that what you were thinking?
I knew that was coming.
There was definitely a personal angle, wasn't there? It was very much.
No.
Because he's all like, there was this guy who bought this. Yeah, but who did he buy it off? He bought it off you.
Well, there was I had the Rodimus stand, and there was a dude that bought it from me. And actually, it was the dude that bought the stand from me that I was thinking of.
Didn't he buy the cardboard prison off you as well?
No, someone else bought that.
Okay.
Someone else bought that. I did have that one as well, just because I was intrigued by it more than anything. And I did, at one stage, I would say I had, certainly by my own metric, a complete Masterpiece collection. I don't anymore, though, because, a couple of bits have gone and whatever. I've still got a lot of it, don't get me wrong. But yeah, at one stage it was complete. But I think actually it was the stand going, that Rodimus stand, that I was like, okay, well, it's not complete anymore, so it doesn't matter. And it was kind of freeing, actually. I think I'd never set out to be a completionist. I'd never set out to have that complete lineup and all of the different bits and bobs as well. But actually, suddenly the one piece going, it's almost like popping a cork. Suddenly it's like, okay, well, it doesn't matter anymore. Do you know what I mean? If I don't have that piece, I'm not gonna seek to rebuy it. The offer that I was made, I couldn't refuse to part ways with it. And it didn't feel like something I needed to own again. I'd had it once, it had gone. So then completionism for me was off the table at that point, if that sort of rings true. It was an interesting one, definitely.
This thing you were talking about, just this topic and this label of being a completist, and we've already touched on the fact that some people can focus on a specific thing and be a completist, like the art crew, but spreading the art crew even perhaps across various toy lines or eras. But don't you think that you can apply that label sometimes just by looking at someone's collection? And just by looking at a photo of someone's collection, you can tell that's a completist. And if, for example, you looked at the collection of someone who had just the art crew, among other things in the collection, and they had completed that art crew across an era of toys, generations G1, Masterpiece even perhaps, and you'd never look at that particular shelf of the whole art crew and say, that's a completionist or a completist, would you? No, I mean, they might think of themselves that way, but that's not, I think, to a majority of collectors, they wouldn't look at that and equate those two things.
No, you can definitely see the difference, can't you, between sort of a theme and someone who is collecting everything. You can spot that quite quickly because things are grouped together, aren't they? And it's very easy to spot the difference.
But I was going to say, even if it's just Masterpiece, for example, if Sixo was displaying his collection, the entirety of his collection, and on one particular shelf, he had every single variant of MP1 and MP10, and they were in this massive line, and it was almost like you were looking at every possible release of it, you would be forgiven for thinking that this is a Masterpiece completist, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that would be your natural assumption. I think you're right. You can sort of snapshot that stuff and think that. I guess it's always interesting in some ways to see which bits people don't have in their collection then, like which bits they've either actively chosen to leave out or maybe not been able to get hold of. Or, I mean, we were talking vinyl tech, in the last episode. And of course, there was a really interesting example of the Wonderfest Black Convoy, that actually a lot of people couldn't get hold of. And so that would have been, a notable absence. So even a lot of vinyl tech or vinyl tech and alternators completists would have had that missing. And I don't know, that for me is an interesting one. Like, do they consider it complete without that? Or is that always like a gaping hole for them? Do they look at it and think, well, like, do you know what? Just winding it back, actually, here's another example, and this illustrates my point. I just said at one point I had a complete masterpiece collection, but I never had the Lucky Draw MP1 Convoy, and nor would I have ever done, because, I mean, it's ludicrous, right? Like, it's we know someone that has it, and it's incredible to see pictures of it, but that's not ever going to be something that it's not even on my radar to consider a purchase like that, So, but I always considered this is complete. And so I guess someone else might look at it and say it's not, you've not got that absurdly expensive gold thing. But actually, to me, that never even kind of entered my thinking, if that, kind of rings true. It's interesting.
There are sort of rules, though, aren't there, almost, that you can come up with for things like that, because though you've completed the retail releases, haven't you? And it's what you can buy, what's available. Even the difficult ones to get, like the exclusives, they're still achievable. Whereas one-offs like the Lucky Draw, it's not, and so you don't consider it part of the line as much.
Exactly, and maybe that's it. Yeah, I guess there are always ways to
novelty.
Yeah, and there are always kind of ways to quantify it, I suppose. Like you said, retail releases, and actually as soon as you said it, I was like, yeah, okay, so actually it was complete in terms of retail releases, and maybe that's just how people kind of quantify their own collections or whatever, or say this is complete. And sometimes I think we do that, even if we might like to have some of those more outlandish toys or whatever to complete something. Maybe we have to kind of give it that sort of definition, if you like, and say, oh, it's retail releases, or it's this, or it's that, in order to kind of limit ourselves a little bit and have some boundaries.
You need those sort of rules, don't you?
Yeah.
That's the thing, though. The very first question we asked was, well, what is completism? So obviously it's not the same thing to everybody, because to one person it's completing all of Transformers, owning everything that ever came out of Transformers.
Sixo.
You knew it was coming.
Right.
Or it could be, I mean, someone starts collecting today and they decide to collect Prime Wars trilogy or War for Cybertron trilogy. If they get all of those toys, every single one, exclusives as well, they would consider themselves a completist, because they're trying to complete something. So, yeah, I mean, I like I said, I can still look at a collection today and I'll get an idea that that person is probably a completist, because they've picked up everything and its variants and its different releases, even like changes in packaging and stuff. And I know from my own history, I've tried to be a completist for various lines. I've never ever tried to be a total completist, own everything. I've never thought that was possible. Not even back in the 90s when it was just G1 to collect and Beast Wars. And I never thought that was even possible back then. So completism, so we're happy to say that it's just people who want to have everything of a particular recognized subset. Happy with that?
I guess so. Yeah, I think it has to be. I don't think, does anybody have every Transformers toy ever? I don't think, is that humanly possible? I can't see how it is now. I mean, after, 37 years, there's just too much. How much space would that even take? And then again, where there's always boundaries or kind of quantifiable measures to it. If you're going to say every Transformers toy ever, okay, so maybe let's say there is someone that thinks that's possible and that's what they're going after. But then do they collect every variant? Are they going to get every like hard-nosed G1 Seeker instead of the rubbery-nosed ones? You know, are they going to get like the you know, Maz is pulling a face, so you can see that's I'm speaking your language now, brother.
Matt's
yeah,
looking at the Mexican
it was-
Skywarp.
It was
Yeah,
what you
exactly.
said earlier. It was like, I'm in this picture and I don't like it. I was like, exactly.
But do you know what I mean? Are they going to get like Seiji
Headshot.
Red Prime as well as the regular Optimus Prime? I'm just like naming a few common variants. But, you know, is that, do they consider themselves complete when they've got every, as you said, Liam, every retail release? Or actually, do they have to get every variant as well? Because at some point, it's just going to be impossible. I mean, no one can collect all of that.
Anyone I've ever known who was a completist of the entire franchise and brand has pared down or given up trying to do that.
Yeah.
And it's obviously been in the last few years when releases have exploded and there are more lines than you can keep track of now. But I mean, all those toys you just mentioned, I have seen and owned in pursuit of a particular type of completion. So I see Optimus Prime completists chasing what you just mentioned. I see G1 Jet completists chasing exactly what you just mentioned. So yeah, there are like compartmentalized completism going on within.
I think
within
that's
the hobby.
it. I think it's that's exactly it. Compartmentalized completionism. And I think the smaller the field of focus, so let's say you just collect Optimus Primes is your thing. The smaller the field of focus, the more likely you are to search for every little bit within that field, I think. Because then, you know, if it's just Optimus Primes, you know, you're probably not going to limit yourself to, I mean, you're certainly not just going to limit yourself to G1, right? You're going to go after Unicron Trilogy and, you know, everything else since. But probably you might lend yourself open to more variants as well. So you would get Pepsi Prime, you would get Seiji Prime, you know, those ones, you know, you would probably get the Jafcon Prime, for example, even though it's not red. I'm just guessing. But I think, whereas actually if you open it up more and you say, okay, I'm going to have a wider field of focus. I'm going to spread my completionism across more lines, more things. It becomes more impossible. Ultimately, you can only get so many toys, right?
So from that, would you say then completionism is more collecting with a goal in some senses? Because you're pretty much setting an end point, aren't you, there? And you have a specific goal and you are getting every toy on the path to that goal. Like you say with the Optimus Prime's example, you are specifically going after every Optimus Prime, but that's it. That's your only goal. And like we were saying with the masterpieces, people are going after the cartoon crew or whatever, and then that's the goal. But to them, they've completed that task. And it's very different to collecting in general. For a lot of people like us, you buy stuff and you have a sort of a focus, a general focus, don't you? But you pick up things from different lines over time. You start getting into different lines and you build up different bits and bobs. Whereas if, again, back to the Optimus Prime example, that's a finite goal, isn't it? And so it is. I wonder if that's what it is more than anything.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I guess it's kind of counterintuitive to what I was saying before, which is that actually in my head anyway, completionism implies a lack of focus, you know, that it's almost just like, okay, gloves are off, I'll collect anything, you know, within a particular line or whatever. Maybe it is pretty focused. I mean, actually, it's just occurred to me, you know, let's take G1 as an example. I know lots of people that have either tried or have completed, in their own words, let's say, you know, Western G1. You know, a lot of people put Japanese G1 to one side because of how expensive some of that is, you know, or whatever. But a lot of people feel that American or European G1 is quite attainable as a goal. And I know a couple of people that are on that way. And I think what's interesting is that actually we have friends, a bunch of us that have a little shared spreadsheet. And it's just occurred to me that actually that I have, my name is on there and I've ticked off a lot of stuff on that spreadsheet as well. And it was never a goal to complete G1, you know, or any of that. But actually just the nature of having a spreadsheet where you're ticking stuff off against a list sort of implies that you are measuring what you've got against a complete standard.
Yeah, but I think there's a difference between goal setting and completing and completionism, because your goal could just be to have all of 1984, or just to have, my goal is to have Autobot cars, Autobot jets, everything that was in the show, you know, or everything that came out in the US. But I do think there's a different element to being a completist. You know, someone, and it's almost like it's become It's just been naturally made easy for people because Transformers is spread under different banners: Beast Wars, Beast Machines, Robots in Disguise, Generation 1, Generation 2. So people can pick and choose the element that they want to complete if their collecting is wired that way. And I think this actually leads on really well to the next question, the natural next question, which is why? Why would people choose to collect in this fashion instead of just picking up whatever they see that looks cool to them? Like, yeah, that looks cool. I'll have that and I'll enjoy it. Why do they goal set in the first place? Especially when that goal is to complete a particular subline, toy run, every version of a character, every variant of a mold. Why do they do that?
I suppose sometimes you need a direction, don't you? Otherwise, it can be quite overwhelming with dozens of different toy lines and things spinning off into every other way, and it can overwhelm you. You just don't know what you're doing, and you just end up buying lots of things, and you don't get as much comfort sometimes from it. You can feel quite empty as you're sampling everything, and I suppose some people need that focus and that drive to keep going almost with it, which is a really weird way to look at it, but I think for some people that's how it works.
Yeah, I can recognise that. I think I talked in a previous episode about talking about G1 again, that I for a lot of G1, look to collect by subline because I found it a lot of fun actually to be like, okay, I'm gonna look for the monster bots now, and then it's like the hunt is on for the 3 monster bots, and that for me was a very satisfying way to go about things because suddenly it gives you a very singular focus. You're not looking at absolutely everything that's out there and kind of going a bit crazy with it. So it does keep you within a very narrow field, which I think is good at times. And yeah, I found it very satisfying because it was like lots of little mini achievements. Every time you completed a little subline of 3 toys, it was a nice feeling to suddenly think, okay, well, I've got those 3 now, I'll move on. So I can definitely recognize that. I think there is that element of box ticking or whatever that can feel quite satisfying.
There's also a point, isn't there? You sort of get to when you've been collecting for a while where you almost start to go backwards. You naturally start thinning down what you're buying. Like if I look over the length of Generation, for example, I would buy a lot more, I suppose, like a wider scope of it than I do now. And over the years, I've gradually started thinning it down to, I suppose, focusing it without intending to, if that makes sense. Like whereas now, like I'm picking up the Beast Wars characters, but I'm not picking up them all, just the odd one here and there. Whereas when the Generation 1 characters come in, I tend to pick up more of them. And instead of buying all of them, I've just, over time, just refined it.
I guess, and you will get people that, with, even with new stuff, they will get absolutely everything. They'll get every release, and it's almost like a compulsion.
Yeah, that's a whole different subject. I think that's a topic we should dedicate a segment to for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, you guys have talked about, Sixo, you've just been talking about ticking off things on a spreadsheet and maybe going after a subset of characters like 3 monster bots, and it's an achievement when you get those. I know when I started collecting, the first driver for me as an adult collector was to have the things I didn't have as a kid. So it was to experience new things that I may have wanted or didn't know existed as a child, even if it's things like Megatron or Grimlock or Devastate. Never had those toys as a kid. Those were the first things I went after. And then as things went on, I learned a bit more about the toys available within the hobby, within the franchise. I sort of refined that a bit more. But I realized that every stage of my collecting, I never completed anything. And to this day, I've never really completed anything. And this was,
Amateur.
I never Scatterbrain.
I'm joking.
I feel like I don't know you anymore.
I know. Who is this man?
He's shattering all our illusions.
Well, it didn't help the things I picked to try and collect, to be honest. It was first of all G1. You start off there because that was my entry point. Then it was, Diaclone. Let's complete Diaclone. No. Ooh. Then it was like, okay, I'll just focus on the European section of Diaclone. Oh, what's that? There are 8 toys that have never been seen before. Okay, so that's not happening. And then it was like, oh, here's a new toy line, alternators and vinyl tech. How did that work out? Didn't do 19 to 22. And so it's just like a series of me getting interested in different things throughout the hobby. And I've enjoyed all of that. And I'm so grateful that I've experienced all of it. But I'd never experienced what it was like to actually finish a whole subset or a line. And I wanted to know, what did that feel like? What does it feel like to get everything in a line and sit back and look at it and appreciate it and then be able to do something with it? Is that documenting it? Is it writing the story of that line? Finding out things that people haven't realized? Because, I mean, a lot of variation info down the years comes from people who buy more toys. That's why dealers know so much about Transformers, because they have the same toy 15, 16 times in stock, and they recognize differences between them. They start to connect the dots. They learn things about the line, and they feed that information back into the hobby. And I always wanted to know what it was like to have, maybe most recently, it would have been Titan's Return and Takara Legends. I wanted everything from those toy lines, to the point where I went and bought another Hasbro Chrome Dome because it was being packaged, errantly with the Takara version head. So there were just a few of those that were found, and I grabbed one of those just to be able to say, there's nothing in this toy line I don't have. And I just wanted to know what that felt like, what it looked like to display it all, and then to go ahead and document it. But it's like my interest never lived on that much within those lines to be able to do that, or I've just not found the toys. I'm still collecting Juicer Diaclones. I've just not found the last few that I need to be able to do whatever I want to do, whether that's write a book, create a website. So that's definitely been a driver for me.
How far did you get with Titan's Return? I know that you had most of them. What were the ones that you were
I think,
not quite there with?
I think Hasbro Titan's Return, I had everything, including variants. I think it was everything.
I'm 99% sure you did, because I remember all your pictures, and I'm pretty certain you had everything.
I remember one person took incredible pride in telling me there was something I was missing, and then subtweeted about the fact as well that he was so thrilled that well, I'm not even going to use the word that he used, but it was like, and the funny thing was, like, the things that he said I was missing hadn't even been released at the time of the photography. So
that's always my favorite with those messages. When you get the old message saying, "Well, where's this figure?" or whatever, and it's like, dude, it's not even been released yet.
Yeah, but that's where
that is
exactly
Johnny.
where Where's Dirge started. That's where Where's Dirge came from. It was like,
Where's Dirge, and it was
they haven't made one.
I know, it was hilarious. Oh man, that comment. I mean, it's kind of on topic, I guess, in a funny way, because it's. I think it's that completionist tendency that people have in their brain in a funny way that drives them to ask that question. Because we all of us like seeing completed lineups. You see. I mean, where's Dirge? You see two cone heads. Where's the third? You want to see it complete. And joking aside, of course, there will be people that don't appreciate that one of the toys hadn't been released at the time when that joke started. And the other one, wasn't it, was RC. For ages it was like, where's RC? And it was like, well, so if someone makes a toy, then then it'll be there. And of course now there are like 16 of them, but how times change. But it's still, I think it's that completist tendency that kind of drives that question a little bit, even if people maybe don't appreciate kind of how silly it comes across, on the other end sometimes. But it's funny. I think we all of us, whether we consider ourselves completists or not, I think we all of us have a sort of innate tendency to like seeing things complete, even if we don't prioritize that in our own collecting.
Yeah, I think we think in completeness in a way.
Yeah.
We want complete toys. We want toys to have all their parts, accessories, paperwork, box, everything it was supposed to come with when we buy vintage.
Well, I think even if sorry to, I was just going to say, even if you don't, I mean, like, I'm not too fussed about paperwork, for example. I know you are, M.A.S, and it's interesting because whenever we speak, you will always mention the paperwork, whereas I'm like, if it doesn't have it, I'm fine. And I think that's interesting because even within that, there are layers of what, but again, it's that focus, isn't it? It's the boundaries that you consider important. So for you, paperwork's important. So you would think of that as, that you need it or whatever. I just think that's interesting.
And I think it comes from a place of, I don't want to miss anything. Like, what if the paperwork includes something of significance? What if there's like a mystery that's been sitting there for 30 years and the paperwork reveals an answer to it? I mean, just recently, I saw the Hasbro 1984 Toy Fair catalog photos. And I'm pretty sure that's probably been floating around in the fandom for decades. But I finally saw a scan of the Toy Fair 1984 catalog, and it's the only place I've ever seen the blue streak. This is before the line was released. It was,
this was on
the
Twitter
black
the other day, wasn't it?
Yeah, the black hooded Diaclone blue streak. That's the first time I've ever seen that version of the mold photographed in Transformers paperwork. Ever. It's always the blue one, or eventually when they came out, the silver one. I've never seen the black hooded one in Transformers paperwork, literature and photography. Maybe art somewhere, and obviously the cartoon. But in the vintage era, that is the one and only place I've ever seen it. And it explains a lot. Because we'd always wondered, how did it ever end up in the cartoon if it's never even been in the hands of Hasbro reps when they've been doing the prep?
Clearly it was.
Yes, and it was. And I'm always worried that, like, if I get this toy, and normally, you know, some of the stuff we collect now is quite tough to get and it's quite costly. Not Unicron costly, mate, but it's costly. And, you know, and if you're buying them regularly, you really got to consider your purchases, and you just don't want to finally get that piece that you've been looking forward to for ages and then have it not feature everything it came with, just in case there's, you know, a bit that you're missing, and you're not going to go and buy another one. So just want it all to be there. And I know that's why I've collected lines to Completism. I just wanted to sort of have a global view of it and know the real story of it, if that's at all a thing.
Do you think there's some element of conditioning to that, though? Like, when we buy these toys from childhood, there's some expectation, isn't it? You get used to, in the box, it comes with these accessories and these things. And then in the toy line itself, like say for Transformers, there's the special teams, there's these groups, and all through growing up with these things, you just become so used to everything is in a set manner, and there's an expectation of what's going to be there. And so it's almost like you're taught to complete things. And it's like, say for example, if you got a toy and it was missing a missile or something, you take it back because it's not complete, isn't it? So it's ingrained in you really early, isn't it? That sense that you have to have everything that you're meant to have, almost. And it's kind of
I can see what you mean.
Yeah.
But I think, in all honesty, if I'm being completely honest with myself, I've probably been more influenced by other collectors. Yeah. It's joining communities when I was fresh to the hobby and seeing what other collectors who I admired for their knowledge and for their involvement and contributions, what they found significant. And that was automatically, by osmosis, absorbed by my own habits. And I just thought, well, you know, I aspire to be like those people who are significant people in the hobby. They do a lot of good for the hobby, and they've helped everyone's understanding progress because they do it this way. And I sort of set that standard for myself to try and meet that standard. And sort of, yeah, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't influenced by the collectors who were in the hobby when I joined.
I guess that's natural. It does make sense. But I think, you know, we all of us have our own kind of personal journey that we're on with it, don't we? And what, as I said, what we consider to be truly important or whatever. But yeah, I think it is really interesting. I really like what you're saying, Maz, about the whole kind of uncovering the whole journey. But I see you as someone that's very immersive with it as well. You know, you really like to kind of, you don't just kind of dip your toe into something. You're very like, you know, you go swimming in the deep end with a particular line, or yeah, exactly. He's an all in kind of guy. And
totally. Don't you with variants and stuff, for example?
Yeah. I was with that, like with More Than Meets the Eye, absolutely. And I think the idea was that I was going to do a More Than Meets the Eye cover gallery of as a resource, you know, to have every single cover variant. And I do believe I have every single cover variant, but I've not made the resource, you know, so I've not actually scanned them or anything like that. But I'm like that with other things in life, like video games. I get into, I play one video game for the whole year, and I just go totally balls deep into it. And I've been like that in any hobby I've been a part of.
I think it's maybe then part of our nature that drives it. I mean, it would make sense, right? Because not everybody's going to be the same. Certainly, I can understand what you're saying. I don't see that same, trying to think of the right word, that same compulsion, I suppose, in me, for example, or I don't see it in Liam as well, that need to you know. So I think we can appreciate it and understand it and admire it, but I think it's, you know, I don't feel, as much as I might like to have a complete lineup of something, I still don't feel the need to have, you know, every piece of paperwork or whatever. I mean, I guess I was chuckling whilst you were sort of describing it all there, because I was thinking actually earlier, it occurred to me, I did some photos today and a write-up of Generation 1 Landmine. And because I'm doing a couple of bits on Pretenders and all of that at the moment, and it occurred to me that I actually don't have that toy's helmet or hat, if you will. And this is a funny one because, I mean, you guys will, I'm sure, both know that I have a little bag of hats. Here it is, of Pretender hats, because they don't wear them generally. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Oh.
It's as mad as a bag of hats.
yeah, it's my little bag of hats. But yeah, I don't use them because it scuffs the hair, and I like my guys to have perfect hair. Needless to say, they've got to be immaculately coiffured. My pretenders, but I don't want any paint rub. Because I bought them specifically to have a certain condition. But with Landmine, I got it and it's in immaculate condition. But I remember when I got it, it didn't have the helmet. And I'd completely forgotten about that because, of course, they just sit in the bag. I never do anything with them. And it only occurred to me when I got it out to take pictures of it. And I was like, okay, I should probably see about doing one with the helmet then. And I didn't have it. And now I'm in this weird world where I'm like, oh, so that toy's not complete now. So, like, does it bother me that it doesn't have it? Even though if I looked for that helmet,
It's going to end up in the bag.
It would just go in the bag. I'd never use it.
Yeah.
So it's completely pointless. And I've been sitting here this afternoon genuinely thinking, is that a problem for me or not? Do you know what I mean? And I've
I
concluded
love that. I love that you're having this thought because it's so true, isn't it? It's such a
Yeah.
thing that collectors would think
I'm being
about.
honest. I'm being honest. I've concluded actually that it's not a problem and that I'm happy not having it because...
But it will still eat away at you.
No, and it hasn't. So, to be honest, the only reason I thought about it, and you'll both know, I'm sure, what I mean, Maz, I know you will, is the only reason I really gave it thought was photographs. Because very often I like to have stuff because I think I might want to take a picture of that. Like, so with Landmine, it would be nice to have a picture with the helmet, just one, just to say, I did it. Do you know what I mean? And then it can go back in the drawer. But that's not worth searching for that one accessory for me. So, but it is it's a choice. It's a choice to think, okay, I don't have that, I don't need it, and I'm cool with that. And it means that it's not complete, that one piece, and therefore, my complete pretender lineup technically is not complete. But also, I'm fine with that. So it just, I don't know, it struck me as being a little bit of a kind of introspective moment there. It was an interesting one today.
I think it's so important to question your motivations when you collect and a constant conversation with yourself about why am I buying this? Why do I have this? Right. What am I doing next? And what am I doing with what I have? I think it's really essential as a collector because you can't just go onto autopilot and just buy. So I've got a question for you based on that. Why did you want to have all of the pretenders?
Well, I guess that's a really good question, actually, because again, question yourself, question what you're doing, what have you. I think it's a really interesting question. I wanted to have them all because they were toys that firstly, there were toys that I only had one or two of as a kid. So there was, what you were saying before was definitely true. There was an element of like, okay, I didn't have a lot of these. And the ones that I did have, I remember being quite knackered. So like I had a Skullgrin, but by the time I was done with it as a kid, it looked very different, certainly. And I think there was something about kind of getting them in very minty condition and seeing them in all their glory, no paint chips. And that's probably where the thing with the hair comes from as well, because I just like seeing them in that kind of pristine condition. And I think just it kind of snowballed from there, that it was like, I didn't set out thinking, okay, I'm going to get all of these, although then the subline thing kind of kicked in. I think Pretenders, actually, interestingly, was probably the first one where I was like, I'm going to focus on Pretenders now. Because for ages, I remember Groundbreaker was the one. He was the last one. Actually, Metal Hawk is still to go. I don't have Metal Hawk, but that's, let's talk Hasbro releases first of all. But for ages, Groundbreaker was one I couldn't find. And it became actually a bit of a real point of focus. I wasn't looking at other stuff outside of that. It was Groundbreaker was the search. And, I saw many. That's a plentiful toy. It's all over the place. But I wanted one with no paint wear. I wanted one that was complete. I wanted one with no discoloration on the shell or the robot itself. I wanted one with nice stickers or, whatever. So there was a whole kind of list of criteria there. And actually, it felt very satisfying, that one especially, to get in the end. And there was a moment of stepping back and appreciating all of them, where it was like, wow, this is super cool, And then same with the 1989 Pretenders as well. So I think that actually has been one of my most satisfying journeys as part of collecting G1 for sure. Still don't talk to me about Metal Hawk though, because that now I've just remembered that, and now I'm like, oh damn. But
it's funny because I see you as a G1 completist. That's kind of because I realized that you've bought a lot of G1 and you've completed a lot of years, and the things that still drive you to collect are the bits that you don't have from G1. Not solely drive you to collect, but you are driven to have the things that you haven't experienced in G1. And maybe it's the experience that's driving you, not so much the have, don't have. And I have to say, a number of completists I've seen in the past, they don't really get particular about the condition of the things that they buy. They just need to know that they have it, and they've ticked it off. So that's like another element, another way to do it.
I've seen that. I've seen that a lot, where it's just like, because I mean, in theory, you could collect, I don't know what percentage, 80%, I guess, of G1 at a guess, fairly easily and quite cheaply as well. Because if you don't care about, I mean, I often laugh at some of the eBay auctions and things that you see out there, but if you wanted to get, I don't know, a Target Master Scourge, for example, I'm sure there's several on eBay right now, but Lord knows what condition. Yeah, probably.
I wish.
Lord knows what condition they'll be in. They'll be yellowed. They'll be missing all the accessories. Probably the Target Master. They'll probably be missing one of his wings. But does that count? If you just want to complete for the sake of it, it was what, a $5 and job done.
Because how long would you actually be looking for things if you were legitimately trying to complete all of G1 or all of Transformers? If everything had to be mint, you couldn't do it in a lifetime.
Well, I think maybe you're right. I mean, particularly if you're going all the variants and everything, then yes, it would be truly impossible. But I think certainly I do have, as you do, a standard that I like to maintain that I think is important for me personally anyway, that I kind of see as relevant for my collection. So yeah, I think condition is important, definitely.
It's funny that you say that standard is what stops me buying more. It's a limiting factor, and it really meters how much I can buy. And it's my lack of discipline that I suddenly go and start becoming a bisque completist on the side and filling my time with other purchases because I can't find the thing that would fit the main focus of my collection. So there's that element to it as well. It's that discipline of then not suddenly starting something else that feels achievable.
Yeah, but just think, man, when you get that last bisque that you need for your collection, you can step back and just, marvel at all the bisques, complete
Have a
bisques.
lobster pot.
I honestly, sometimes I despair at myself. Like, I've been looking for McDonald's changeables, and it wasn't enough for me to find all of the changeables sealed in the US package. Then I started to think about my own nostalgia, but what if I could find the UK versions? Because I just realized they were different, and now I'm looking for those. And then there was an auction this week for a pack of 4 French changeables. And I was like, oh, sealed French changeables. I mean, that's got to be rare, right? But like, I don't want that, do I? Like,
what about
that would be proper completism, and like, I'm not sure that's what I want to do.
You make me laugh so much, man.
I make myself laugh, really.
Can't even tell you how much.
I've become a parody of myself, honestly.
It is hilarious. But like, this was the same with Mini Spies, right? Because you
was.
Yeah, well, true. But like, that made me laugh because I saw it with you with Mini Spies, because you and I were talking about this the other day, that you obviously wanted each faction, so Autobot and Decepticon.
No. Okay. No, I've got to stop you there because, and I'll tell you why. I'm really sorry. I've been doing this because I have an article in mind, and I've been working towards this for a year, and I can't have you go and reveal why I'm doing this article.
Okay. I won't. I didn't realize.
I'm just waiting to have enough examples to be able to do the photography I want for it.
Got you.
And people have been telling me for years, just write that Juicer Diaclone book. You don't have to have all the toys to write the book. Well, damn it, I want them all to do the book. I want to do it, and I don't ever want there to be a version of it that comes along and supplants it because this wasn't complete. So with the Mini Spies, I mean, you're right, it is exactly that, but there is.
But it's funny. But that aside, I do admire it as well, because you have the goal in mind and you're sticking to it. And I think as much as it is kind of I'm not going to lie, as much as it's quite funny at times, because I get to hear some of the more ridiculous stories about, what you've been up to or whatever. I still admire it because it's not the way that everybody collects, and it is, it's unusual, and you purposely make life difficult for yourself to get to what you want, what the goal that you set yourself, if that kind of makes sense. And I think that's funny, but I think why not? Because that's what you enjoy about the hobby, and I think that's important. You've as you said earlier, you've had that conversation with yourself, and you've identified what it is that interests you, and you're sticking to it.
Yeah, there's also an element of delusion. For example, you remember when the three of us were doing like the GCWO, hashtag GCWO, check it out on social media. I mean, when I got to the Mini Spies page, it was pretty much the last thing we did for 1985. I was like, this is going to be the crescendo, the finale, Hey, everyone, get this. Mini Spies, the whole story. Boom. Nobody cared. It's just nobody cared about it. It was like the least well-performing version of that entire series.
I'm gonna admit something now. I remember that distinctly, and I remember you being like, "Oh, but guys, in 3 days' time or whatever, it's Mini Spy Day. I can't wait." And you were so excited. And every time you mentioned it, I was kind of sat there like, no one's gonna care.
Oh, it was just like, wow.
No one's gonna give a
lead away from him.
Yeah, so I didn't want to crush his enthusiasm. He was happy.
It's like, I put funny, so much into those pictures. I got Kit to do the half colors. Like, no, let's get this absolutely right. And I was just, when you hit that send tweet, and you just sit back and go, okay, here it comes, boom.
Here's the adulation. Where is it?
Any moment now, people are going to care.
It's when you're looking at it and you're going like, it's been 48 seconds and I've got 1 like. Where's the rest?
If the number of likes are not more than the number of minutes that the tweet's been up, you're in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Do you ever get that feeling like when it's like the first 50 seconds and no one's liked it and you're like, should I delete it and repost it later at a better time? Clearly chosen the wrong time here.
Definitely.
It's my error.
I am in this picture and I don't like it is the theme of today.
I get that, it's a separate topic, but I definitely get that where, when you put like hours into something like a photo or an article or whatever it is, you genuinely like spend so much time on it and you're just so happy to launch it, and it goes and then it gets like 10 likes and then you post some meme or like, stupid post or whatever and it gets like 1,000 likes and it's just like, sure, okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. That's an equivalence. It does make me laugh.
There's almost like an element of photo completism as well. Like, we try really hard to probably post our photos in a way, and we're like really happy when we've got the last member of a crew, and you're like, I'm going to post them all together. I've done them individually, and now here they are as a set. And by that time, people have lost interest. It's like, how many more angles of this toy do I need to see? So it's almost like a thing for me to tick off in my head, like, this was the goal I had. Here's the culmination of this effort.
Well, you feel like you're telling a story, don't you? Almost to yourself. It's like a story of, I've been getting these toys, and here's all the photos, basically, isn't it? As it's progressing.
Yeah, the photos definitely drives me in that way. The kind of, I don't know, having it on the shelf or whatever is one thing. Taking the photos and sharing the photos is another part of it for sure, and it definitely drives that. I think in some ways for me that drives the condition thing that you were saying about before as well,
100%.
Because
100%.
I'm like, I want to. It is a bit of showing off. I'm sure it is. Whether I like the sound of that or not, I'm sure there is an element of that. But I want to share pictures that I'm proud of something that looks immaculate, and the idea of just picking up some yellowed sticker worn thing. That it doesn't satisfy me, and it wouldn't satisfy me to have that in photos so much. So I'm sure it definitely drives the kind of completist bit as well.
And you probably made a rod for your own back by starting this trend of posting photos of toys in a particular condition and of a particular line.
You set a standard, don't you?
Yeah, you almost obligate yourself in a way to then make sure the rest of them meet that standard and you complete that line. In definitely. A way, I think it has like a reverse effect. You self-enable, and gosh, we know what that's like, just doing this podcast.
Yeah. There's nothing more self-enabling than this podcast, I can tell you.
It's cost me a fortune.
Yeah.
And now, back to Transformers Generation 2.
But I think the obligatory part that you mentioned or hinted at is interesting as well, because there's a lot of that, I think. And I think, I guess, going back to your original question of what is completism, that to me, when I think of the word completionism, it implies a sense of obligation a little bit as well. I guess the word itself, like the sort of, if you imagine a dictionary definition, I'm sure there isn't one, but of like completionism, it implies a sense of duty, of obligation, of and not a lot of fun, actually. And I guess that's why it's typically used as probably a little bit of a dirty word, isn't it? A negative word. Ooh, the completionism. It's kind of like someone that's just sucked all the fun out of the hobby and is just doing it to kind of literally, as we've already kind of talked about, tick off names on a spreadsheet, as opposed to someone that's like really passionate. And then I know that some people also see that there's this kind of like fun, carefree attitude where people just buy any toy they want and it doesn't matter about completing a line, and somehow that's more desirable. I don't know. Does that ring true?
I've been on both sides of that fence, and yeah, I can see the benefits and downsides. The example that popped into my mind just now, where you were talking about that, was G1 Squeeze Play. I mean, that's never a toy that I've desired. The only reason I went after it was because I had virtually every other Headmaster and almost every other Master from 1988, and I had on my shelf Horrible and Fangry, and was actually pretty much in love with those two. I thought they were so cool, and so Squeeze Play was the one I was finding hardest to get, and I needed it for that shelf. I think Liam said in a few episodes ago, need is a bad word.
Yeah.
And I got that toy, and I have to admit, I was like, this just isn't as good as the other two for me. I'm not enjoying it as much. There's a snake head hanging off its butt, and that's just supposed to be okay, even though it has like quite a lot of articulation for a toy of that era and looks really wild with crazy colors. But it's definitely not the one I like out of those three. But I bought it because that's what I was doing at the time, and I didn't think my collection needed it in a way. Like, that's what I've set myself a target of completing, and so here he is.
Should point out that Fangry has a wolf's head hanging off his bum.
Fangry is top to bottom hot pink with a green face. He's allowed.
I'll give you that. Fangry's pretty boss, but I like Squeeze Play a lot as well. Horrible would be the outlier for me of those three, but that's a whole other topic, I guess. But
so do you think that speaks to some element of disappointment with completionism then? Because you've bought a toy to complete that set and you've actually found it's quite disappointing. That was the outcome of you getting all three. Whereas when you just had two, you were much happier, so to speak.
Yeah, I think the financial outlay on it was higher than the other two as well, because it was one that I was willing to go to a higher level for, because it was the last of the set I needed. But I have to admit that the satisfaction and joy of doing the photographs of him with the other two, and now having him on the shelf, and then if I should do another group photo with 1988, I can have them all in their wonderful shared palette, makes up for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think I can totally understand that, because yes, there are individual toys that I have that I'm like, less fussed on, let's say, but actually the joy of having the complete line, and it's not just a box tick, the joy of actually having them and being able to take photos of them and interact with them and see them complete makes up for it. And I can definitely identify, there are definitely G1 lines like that, where there's an outlier, or there's one that I'm less fussed on or whatever, but it's still somehow fun for me to have them. I guess, but there are also definitely some releases that I've got through sort of a kind of obligatory feeling of duty or whatever that are a bit disappointing when they get there, and you're like, wow, I can't believe that I kind of went after that,
So, like, Liam, did you ever buy anything because it was part of a line that you were collecting, and then maybe it's like, if you had that money and you had to make a choice between buying something you thought looked cool or something that had come out and you may not be able to get later, but it's for a line that you're collecting. I mean, has that mentality ever crossed paths with your collecting at all in any way, shape or form?
Not really. I do tend to collect in, a bit like that, sort of, say with the Dinobots, for example, I'm buying all the Dinobots, but I like them all. But in general, no, I'm quite easy at taking and leaving stuff. Like, I suppose the closest I got was with the Masterpiece Seekers. I bought all six, and by the time I was getting to the last couple of the cone heads, I wasn't enjoying it, and I was starting to really set in that I wasn't enjoying it anymore with those. But
That's
I
a
was
good
buying
example.
it for the sake of it, because at the start it was quite exciting, but we'd seen it so many times. But I felt like I did need those characters, because the masterpiece line, like we're talking there, it wouldn't look right on the shelf, almost missing that character. And that was actually a moment where I really did step back and go, oh, I don't enjoy these anymore. But then, like I was saying earlier about disappointment, that really soured me on them, the ones I'd liked before at the same time, because I just couldn't enjoy the mold in the same way, because it had put that disappointment into my mind.
Those cone heads, those masterpiece cone heads, were a real downer for a lot of people. You know, they're not well made, particularly. You know, like let's be honest,
Yeah.
They deserved better.
yeah. I mean, they're obviously a heavy retool of the MP11 mold, which actually I think a lot of people quite liked. You know,
Yep.
or at the time anyway. Like I really did like the MP11 mold, and you're right, because it has, if anything, the cone heads have kind of soured my feeling on that mold. But generally, you know, it's funny because now I'm like really excited about the new Seeker that's coming up, MP52 or whatever. But yeah, at the time, it was a really strange one, and I fortunately actually I thought Dirge was the best, the third
Yes,
one.
he
I
was.
thought
He was the best.
they actually got better as they went, whereas Ramjet and Thrust, particularly Thrust, actually my Thrust is really loosey goosey and just kind of like not very well put together. So yeah, really disappointing. And I know exactly what you mean. I think I was dead excited for the idea of Masterpiece Coneheads, but there was a real feeling of obligation, sort of going through the motions with those guys along
And
the
there's
way.
also the cost of them as well. And it's not like you can't afford them, but it's when you're disappointed with something is that you feel almost obligated to buy. It then becomes almost begrudging, doesn't it? And you sort of then start viewing it completely differently.
That had a lot to do with why I stopped collecting Masterpiece.
Yeah, and same with me. You just kind of reach a point with some toy lines. That's what I was saying earlier. There are points when you get to with a toy line, and suddenly your focus shifts from being quite happy to complete it, and that's your plan, to then sitting it down and then picking out what you like, doesn't it? It changes the experience.
I think the Seekers is probably an interesting one in any line, because I'm just thinking back actually again, just not to go on about Masterpiece, but I do remember it being interesting that actually with Thundercracker and Skywarp, because obviously they were announced so long after Starscream in the second ones anyway, the MP11 mold, and they were announced so long after that actually there was a genuine feeling of excitement, I think, at the time for Thundercracker and Skywarp. I remember when they announced Skywarp, I was just like, oh my God, yes, this looks incredible. You know, I was so up for it. But then it's interesting to sort of see that, you know, Takara must have been like, okay, we're onto a good thing here. And actually the Coneheads kind of killed off the enthusiasm a little bit. But I think Seekers is an interesting one because it's probably a real acid test for any toy line. I mean, I have seen people getting fed up with the, you know, some of the War for Cybertron Seekers and stuff that are coming out as well, particularly as they're so hard to find. I've seen a lot of people feeling that, you know, like Thrust, the WFC Thrust is kind of an obligated purchase, particularly as it's so hard to get hold of. You know, I've been contacted by a couple of people privately saying, do I want a Thrust? And I'm like, no, really, I'm cool. But it's interesting that is happening and that people are trying to help each other out. But I don't see a lot of joy with that either.
But you can see, and this brings up a point as well, actually, where you can see people souring on the toy line as a whole because of it. Like you can see people on Twitter, a lot of it's hyperbole. You know, you see a lot of people suddenly say, I'm sick of this, I'm not collecting anymore, or they're like, this toy, the stress of trying to get it's ruined what I like about these things. And so, and you see that with how awkward it was to get it, because it was an exclusive, wasn't it? But I actually had I was really stressed trying to get them, but I had the reverse experience that I did with the Masterpiece, where each one I got, I loved it. Like I really like Generations Thrust. I thought he was fantastic. But,
I definitely had that feeling of being soured on the difficulty of getting things and the sheer volume with people most commonly call it the Diaclone reboot, even though it's not particularly a reboot. But the new Takara Tomy Diaclone line started off as a manageable thing where every release was a knockout. And I still loved every single toy I got, but it was just getting to the point where I realized I was trying to have a complete collection to be able to enjoy every single feature of interconnectivity that they were throwing at us. I didn't want to miss a trick. I wanted to be there with everything, photograph everything, experience everything, discover everything. But it just got to the point where owning that many of the same thing, having to be so on the ball with pre-orders, because if you miss it and then it's on the secondhand market, the price just escalates. That made it really unfun.
Yeah.
And I started to think like, oh, I've missed one reissue. I've missed the new big powered. What is that, like $250, 300 quid? I'm not going to do
It's
that
an
just
expensive
for
line. No, yeah.
But the thing is, I knew that when I spent the money and had it in hand, it was spectacular. But it wasn't enough. Even enjoying every single toy wasn't enough, because it was just, I was even going out and buying 3 of each to start with because it was all modular and you could do more with more. But that I soon cut that down to 1, and then I cut it down to none. And it's like Sixo mentioned the gold MP1 Optimus Prime Masterpiece Convoy earlier. I remember at BotCon 2006, I had one in my hands because the people that we were traveling with and were staying with, he had got one from Japan and he was going to sell it to an attendee of BotCon. So, we took some fun pictures of it, and it was really nice to see it in hand. But that toy today has an extra 0 on the price.
Yeah.
Back then, it was relatively still a crazy high price.
Yeah.
Oh God, you broke it, didn't you? You broke it.
No, I really didn't.
Where did you drop it?
Silence. And after now, any Masterpiece collector who's a completist will wish that they were collecting at that time. So some element of completism is almost your advantage is to be collecting it at the time of release. It's almost becomes impossible to go back and do it retroactively. And I especially feel that way with Masterpiece and that gold MP1, because I think people pay so much for stuff today compared to back then that if they'd known what that one had sold for at BotCon 2006, they'd be tearing their hair out and going, but I would buy that today for that price. But back then it didn't feel that way. But the person who did buy it is probably extraordinarily grateful that they did, because today it's just unobtainable. So
I've seen quite a bit of that though recently, not to the same level. I'm not talking like adding an extra 0, but we've talked a lot more recently about stuff like Shining Magnus, and all of that that were plentiful. They were abundant toys at low value. Nobody wanted them. Even though they were limited releases. You couldn't give them away almost. I'm not exaggerating too much, but
the legend of Anime Astro Train. Why did it become so valuable? Because people didn't want it, didn't pre-order it, they didn't do as many of them as they should have, and suddenly it's rare and everyone wants one.
Yeah, I'm one of those people. One of those people who didn't want it and now regrets it really painfully.
Yeah, but it's common, and you see it a lot actually. I mean, those eHobby exclusives are real, real ones for it. It's fair to say, but you do see it a lot where suddenly it's that retrospective thing, as you were saying. Nobody wanted it at the time. Those that got it at the time, I'm sure, are grateful for it. But actually going back and getting some of this stuff can be hard. And I think there was a real window with eHobby, I feel like, which was sort of came to a close quite recently, where suddenly the stuff overnight almost just skyrocketed and became more impossible. And I have had several people more recently say to me, hey, do you know where I can get a Shining Magnus or something like that? And it's like, oh, dude, it's going to be more difficult now for sure. And it's so funny. I don't know why that window just suddenly closed like almost overnight. But I think it is hard to go back and do some of this stuff retrospectively. G1 actually, to a certain extent, is easier than some of the stuff that's come since in a sort of bizarre way. Masterpiece, I think, is one that would be, I think now, like the idea of now starting a Masterpiece collection and going completist on it is crazy. Like I can't imagine how you would approach that really, because the sheer prices you would be paying for stuff is just, I would never do it personally, but I'm sure people do. I again have spoken to people that are like, okay, I'm going to try and get into Masterpiece. Where can I find MP9 and where can I find this? And they want to get all those past releases, and it must be very hard.
Masterpiece is such a fascinating case study for that, though, isn't it? Because it is a toy line where it's sort of almost targeted at completionists, but it's got such a defined theme to it with the cartoon. And you've seen it now, people who do collect everything, and you'd say they'd completed it almost, but when they've done the MP Plus versions of, say, Wheeljack or the cars,
right,
they will get rid of the other versions. They'll replace them.
Yeah.
But they'll still have all the other variants, but they won't. They'll just go on sale.
So
it's
yeah, 100%. I recently sold my old versions of the cars actually because I had the plus versions and I had the originals. So like I had MP20 wheeljack and I had MP20 plus wheeljack. I think it's 20, isn't it, wheeljack? Yeah. And I had both versions of each. And it occurred to me that all of the old versions I'd put back in boxes because for a time I was like, oh, it's nice to have them. Do you know what I mean? And maybe I'll get these out again someday and appreciate them. Because I actually do like the real world decos, the livery on things like wheeljack and whatever. And then I think just one day I just went, I just don't need them. They're just in the boxes, and it seems silly to me. Whereas actually, people will be looking for them, and they're in good condition, and I can part ways with them, and I'm happy with the plus ones. And it sort of made sense to me that. But I do think. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, but to you, does your collection feel any less complete without those versions because you've got wheeljack and you've got red alert and stuff like that?
Exactly. I would have said so at the time, but I think mentally it was a bit of a shift from me. It was the Rodimus stand that was the first, because that was the first bit to go. It kind of opened the floodgates a little bit, and after that it was like, okay, so I don't need all of this. And I am looking at some other stuff now, like I have MP4S, the sleep mode convoy, which is a beautiful thing, absolutely beautiful figure, incredible release. I got to be honest, I'm considering parting ways with it, because I'm just thinking it's one that lives in the box because it's too precious to kind of not look after or whatever, and I love having it and I'm proud of it, but I'm kind of getting to that point where I'm like, do I need it? Have I had my time with it? And so it's interesting how the once you kind of drop that completionism from it and sort of take that pin out, the gloves are off. Where does it end? The stuff that you can suddenly do without, if that makes sense.
It really finds it, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't think that's a question that completists of that nature ask themselves, because that questions the very thing they're doing.
Yeah.
Because if it's like, a lot of it you can never display. If you are buying everything, then some stuff is very similar to the other stuff, and you'd rather display a different figure than the same one in slightly lighter blue, unless that's how you do your display. You just want like a rainbow effect of every version. So a lot of stuff will just live in storage, and it's the mental, I have it.
I think it's worth acknowledging, though, that I don't at any point regret any of that. I don't regret collecting that stuff because I enjoyed it at the time, and I loved having it. So like I loved having those original cars, and I do see it like that. Like I know sometimes people are like,
I'm amazed you sold them. I'm really surprised.
Well, no, it wasn't actually a big thing in the end for me. I was quite happy to see them go. I don't know what surprises you,
because I realize that a lot of your pleasure in doing photography is being able to show how things were and how they are. Like,
yes,
if we imagine Masterpiece ends. And I think this whole completist thing is a very different flavor between something that is finite and done and something that is ongoing today.
That's true.
So if Masterpiece ends, then there is a finite number of Masterpiece cars. And suddenly this is a goal that has taken a shape and has a finite form now. And it's almost like your relationship with it can change. And suddenly you think, well, I've got all of these cars. That's 95% of them. But I don't have the original colors of those. I kind of think that's the same reason sometimes people who were originally happy with Target Master Blur, Target Master Hot Rod, and Target Master Cup have then gone and bought the standard versions of those and then the reissues as well.
I'm in this picture and I don't like it. I mean, it's I said to you the other day, didn't I? There's a G1 Blur that I was eyeing up, the 86 one, and I have a lovely 87 Blur. And it's just the lack of belly button suddenly is quite tempting.
They're different enough.
Yeah.
And they can live on different shelves, different years, different concepts, movie toys, Target Master toys, and it's a finite thing. So you can mentally massage your way into seeing how that big picture looks. But when Masterpiece cars are coming out all the time, and there could potentially be more plus versions or plus versions or minus versions, then you're going to think like, well, yeah, you know what? I'm going to let this one go in order to have the next one, or just to sort of manage the space that is constantly needed for more of them.
I think I guess coming back to my point before as well, I think this is interesting, is that I don't regret letting them go. I did enjoy them for the time I had. I was sad to see them go. I was sad because I do love those original toys. I don't know why I keep thinking of Wheeljack. Wheeljack is the one, I guess, because it's so different to the Plus version.
Yeah.
And the all the library and stuff really does look great. So I was sad to see it go. But at the same time, there's an element of enjoyment for me. I don't know how to say this. I'm going to give you I'm going to give you an example. This is something my grandmother used to say to me. She was talking. My grandmother was someone that grew up with no money. She grew up on a tiny little house with no electricity, and for her, she had a very interesting relationship with money because she was very much a thrifter, a saver, all of that kind of stuff. And her thing was that it's okay to buy expensive stuff as long as you get your use out of it, and it's because it's not about how much something costs, it's about how many times you use it. So if you buy, I don't know, a coat, you can buy a coat that costs you £50, and if you only wear it once, that's £50 every time you wear it. Whereas if you buy a coat that's £100, but you wear it 100 times, it's £1 every time you wear it. And that has always stuck with me, and kind of, I guess whenever I remember that, it blows my mind a little bit. So I guess I think back on stuff like those Masterpiece cars and think, well, was it weird for me that I had them and then I bought the Plus versions and then I sold them and all of that? Well, no, because I enjoyed them for the time that I had them, and I did get tons of use out of all of them. So actually, the price of entry and selling them on, I'm sure I got some of the money back or whatever. It was worth it for me. Do you know what I mean? The enjoyment that I bought from those was valuable. Does that make sense? What the point I'm trying to get across?
Yeah.
So even though I don't have them anymore, I still enjoyed them for the time I had them.
I think actually that's very applicable to the toys you're talking about. But I personally, I would never hold you to that as a philosophy when it comes to something like Black Zarek. Because a vintage Black Zarek, if you were to calculate the cost per use because of the way that toy is constructed and
true.
all of the it's a different, your enjoyment from that cannot be metered from use. It's almost like just being in the same room as it is its value.
I think you've got to quantify use in that sense, because
absolutely.
use could be visual appreciation, it could be taking pictures of the thing, it doesn't have to be picking up and playing with it and
what
whatever.
it means
I think
to you, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's how you interact with it. But certainly you've got to get some use out of it, I think, for me anyway. And I feel like I'm going to say something now which is going to sound like I'm dissing certain people's collections, and I'm not. But for me personally, I wouldn't consider it use to buy something and just put it in storage. That doesn't ring for me. And so I guess that's why with those cars, after a certain period of them just being in boxes, I was like, well, actually, I'm happy to see these go now. Do you know what I mean? I feel like I've had my time with them, and I can't immediately foresee a time where they're going to come back out again and be appreciated. Whereas actually with some stuff is different, because like, trying to give you another example, but I do have one or two Masterpiece bits that are in boxes, but I haven't sold on because I still know that I have them. So like Eva Convoy is another one that actually does live in its box, and that's again because I want to protect it and look after it and whatever. It's so beautiful, but that I have no desire to sell whatsoever, in case anybody's listening. But just because that to me is one that I know I could get out and will get out in the future and appreciate all over again.
Oh, they're not listening at this point. They're all messaging you about your sleep convoy. You can just expect a slew of messages.
Email Sixo at triple takeover.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not. Yeah,
giveaway.
Oof, I don't think so.
I'm sorry to keep bringing up Wheeljack, but I think the source of my surprise you actually covered is the fact that it's so different from the Plus version. So, like, imagine if they came out with another version of the Lancy mold. Imagine if they did a Masterpiece Charger, and is it Charger? I'm thinking of
Slicer.
Slicer.
You think it's
I'm
Slicer?
sorry, Slicer.
That's okay. Yeah.
Not being able to post a photo of Slicer, exhaust, Plus Wheeljack, and original Wheeljack, just. I can't imagine a world where that doesn't happen.
No, but it is what it is, isn't it? I guess it doesn't bother me. I don't know. I'm cool with it. So I don't know. And maybe I would get a couple of comments or whatever online, people going, "Oh, where's the original Wheeljack?" I don't know, but It's fine.
Not for their comments, almost for your own pleasure of having the set of them. Because actually that's quite finite, the MP Lancia mold is pretty finite. So, and they're so different, actually.
There's only 3 of them so far. But I guess that's my point, is that I've made my peace with it. So I don't want to be like, I'm over it, Jack. Do you know what I mean? But I kind of am in a way. You know, it's like when I made the decision, I did think about it for a long time and reasoned, I'm cool with this, actually. And I haven't really thought about it since. It's only now. And I'm sitting here thinking, actually, I really am cool with it.
That's that freedom you've bought yourself by breaking the back of it.
Yeah. It is. It did. I think about it a lot of times with that stand going, because it was like, honestly, I know I said it earlier, but it was like a pin being pulled. It was just like, oh, okay, actually, this is not a thing anymore. The completionism thing doesn't apply. You know, suddenly the rules are off. Anything that I have feasibly could be sold, and it has led to a few sales along the way. There's a lot. That's not me saying, I'm selling off Masterpiece, because I'm not. There's a lot. Majority of it that I do want to keep, but there's just meant that a couple of bits could be offloaded. You know, for example, I have sold my MP3 Starscream, which was one that I again took a lot of thought. I was really like, am I going to do this or not? And that was an interesting one, because I'm actually now going to sell off my MP11s as well, because the new Seekers are coming, and I'm like, they look great. I'm all in. You know, hopefully they'll be good, and I have the Make Toys ones as well, because why not? But part of me in my brain kept thinking,
Sixo story that.
Yeah, but
why not? Just have them
well,
all.
you know, the old ones being sold are funding the new ones. So, and but equally, there was part of me in my brain thinking, no, don't sell them just yet. Wait, because it'll be great to get a photo of MP3, MP11, MP52, you know, Make Toys Meteor all in one shot. And then at some point, I just thought, sod it, I don't need that. Do you know what I mean?
That's not the reason you're collecting.
Exactly.
That would be admitting that photography is the reason you collect.
Well, photography is a big part of it, don't get me wrong. Like, photography, as we said, it does drive a lot of things, but that was definitely a moment where, as you say, you have that talk with yourself. That was definitely a moment where I thought, I don't need to do that. Like, I can sell on those other ones. That photo, as nice as it would be, it's not worth it to hang on to them for however many months just for the sake of taking that one photo. I'll be fine without it, you know? So,
someone else will do it anyway. It'll exist.
Yeah, exactly. And someone else will do it long before I get my hands on it, I'm sure. Right. So, who cares? But in Masterpiece, I was just going to say, one thing that does occur to me about Masterpiece, just whilst we're on it, that I think is hilarious, is that Liam, you said before that something about Masterpiece drives an element of completionism, and I agree with that. I think there's a lot about that line specifically that really kind of pushes people. The very nature of it is, you know, assembling the G1 cast or whatever it is. So, you know, there's a lot about it that drives that behavior. What I think is hilarious is that
you're going to talk about the numbering.
Yeah, Takara are doing everything they can to screw with people. I swear they're doing it on purpose, because even stuff like including Beast Wars in the main numbering, and you see so many people are like, why are they doing this? Do you know what I mean? And it's hilarious. And then they do stuff like, you know, Road Rage is MP26.
I was going to say Road Rage. Yeah.
Spin Out is MP39 plus. So how do you explain that? And I've seen some of the most tortured explanations I can imagine online as people are trying to like...
It's been worth it then.
Oh, it's hilarious. I chuckle every time I see someone really going to town on trying to explain the numbering system in Masterpiece, because honestly, I think what happens is they're like, this toy would be cool, let's release it. What number's it going to be? Whatever. And they just slap it on the box and they go. I think there's a lot of care put into that line. I think the numbering is not part of it. I think they just number it whatever and they're done.
But in one occasion, I wish they'd given it more thought. And Sid is the one who mentioned this, and it's like, what if Megatron had been MP38? I mean, how cool would that have been?
And it was 36, wasn't it? And they could have just delayed it by two releases. But I remember when they did MP25, and do you remember? Because it hadn't been announced, we'd had 24. We knew what 24 was, and for ages it was like, what's 25 going to be? And you had people going, it's going to be Megatron, it's going to be Megatron, it's going to be Galvatron, it's going to be something major because it's 25. It's like a round number, you know. It's got to be something amazing. And there was a huge gap before 25 was revealed. And then, of course, it turns out to be tracks. And
The best
and it was
cardboard.
the best cardboard. I loved
Yeah.
it. I loved
Isn't
it.
that the great thing about having a podcast, that you can just, this is our platform to say MP25 tracks is
We're writing that
amazing.
wrong.
Yeah, it's an incredible toy. And anybody that says it's not, well, they
They can
jump.
start their own podcast.
They can. I was going to say they can jump in the
Podcast of
river,
lies.
but yours is maybe slightly less harsh. Yeah, but no, it's an incredible toy. I absolutely love it. But I just thought it was so funny that people expected the numbering to lead to some consequence, and of course it didn't. But people still look for that methodology in the numbering of Masterpiece, and I think it is the completionism.
Yeah,
kind
it
of
supports
tendency.
the methodology. It supports the philosophy of it. Absolutely.
It does.
There's that immense satisfaction of seeing numbers 1 to 50 or 1 to 100 from the
100%.
side. Consistent packaging. Don't you dare change the packaging. Vinyl Tech, what were you thinking? You know, it's that exact thing. Like, it all feeds into it. And
But the Beast Wars thing in Masterpiece, I saw so many people getting quite angry with Takara actually for introducing, Masterpiece Optimus Primal and putting it in the main numbering, just because they were like, well, now I don't have I don't want to collect, Man in Pig, and now Truck Not Monkey and all of that malarkey, and now I'm not going to have all the numbers. So yeah, people were angry. It was I've at the risk of sounding unsympathetic, I find it quite funny. Just that I used to be bothered by the numbering, and then at some point I was like, okay, this is just amusing.
They were totally let off the hook with the original movie masterpieces, weren't they? Like MPM1 or MPM2.
Yeah. They made it a new line. Yeah, they made it a new line. Yeah, I think honestly they're having a laugh.
Yeah, some of my favourite memories of the TFW was when not Masterpiece was at its peak so much, but when the Fervor was at its greatest, and it's when they were doing the car bots, and I can't remember which one it is, and I think it's one of the repaints that's got like just a normal number, and people went crazy, and it was just it was so funny seeing people like they're just outraged by this, and it's like, for me it was just like I didn't even pay attention to them.
Road Rage was the first one, right?
I think that's the one. Yeah, they treated it as a separate
26,
yeah, and again
straight after tracks.
Yeah, Spin Out and the others are not. They're all. I mean, Spin Out is a plus release, which is also weird because why is it not MP39S or whatever? Do you know what I mean? Which would make more sense. But instead,
wasn't Corden its own number too?
Yeah, he was 42, I think. So Corden gets his own number, but Spin Out doesn't. Which is, I mean, where's the logic in that? But I think it has driven a lot of people to distraction. And I think it all ties into the completionist tendency, definitely.
Yeah, and I wonder if Star Saber made them feel the same, because of those who were assembling a cast of show characters, maybe that just wouldn't have appealed to them. And you touched on that a while ago about how MP Star Saber just because it was Masterpiece, a lot of people were like, well, I don't know the character, so I'm out. But for completists, maybe that was a tricky one.
It is incredible how that completionism then extends from the toys to things like the numbering system. It's just quite amazing how far it goes, isn't it?
Well, is it not somehow, maybe not for everybody, and I'd hate to put a blanket statement out there, but there is a degree of compulsion to it. I'll stop short of saying OCD because I don't want to associate it with any negative connotation of it being a disorder or anything like that. But I know I laugh at myself and I use the phrase OCD when it comes to some of my collecting habits and the degree of difference between the 5 or 6 Diaclone Mirages I had. But there is a compulsion to it, and there is this sort of meticulousness to it. And I can totally see why the numbering of a line that has tried so hard to stay consistent bothers people who collect that way. So even though we've expressed really differing views on, how our collections could fall into completionism or completion or not fall into those, are there any lines that any of you guys have ever set out consciously to complete and have the full set?
No. Never. I think for me it's so defined by just like, I don't know, if I use the turtles for example, once I've got the 4 turtles and possibly a shredder, I'm pretty happy despite the dozens of other toys you can get. And it tends to go like that in all of the toy lines, really. Even
Jurassic Park?
Yeah, because there are so many bloody dinosaurs.
Oh wow, too many dinosaurs. How terrible.
There are dinosaurs I don't know what they are or how to pronounce them.
Mate, my son's got a book. I can lend it to you. It's pretty good. It's pretty good, actually.
Does it also teach pronunciation?
It does. Yeah. It spells them out phonetically. It's pretty good.
I see. I'm surprised because I feel like you have every version of the Jurassic Park Jeep ever.
You know what? I have almost every version, but there are
Ooh.
things I've left. Like, do you stretch to there are like the remote controlled versions they do now and stuff like that. There are so many of them, and the various Matchbox ones. There are so many variants.
I guess does it then? I guess it's what we're saying earlier, isn't it? Is the quantifiable bit of it? It's what you consider a toy or what you consider part of it. Like, I don't know, if you only collect Optimus Primes, like we know someone that only collects Optimus Primes.
I think he's requested that we name him now.
Yeah, we're not going to do that though, because he requested it. So, yeah. and then he'll never really know if we mean him or not. But anyway, this
Vincent
person,
Wang, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Look him up on IMDb.
Yeah, indeed. But this person,
It'll be a very short entry.
He's if you only collect Optimus Primes, are you then going to get this new £700 thing that's coming out, the self-transforming one? Does that count towards, or is that not a toy? Is that not kind of something that your brain would kind of click and go, oh, I need that? Because I guess it's like the same with remote controlled Jurassic Park Jeeps. I don't know, maybe there's a distinction.
Well, that Jeep is actually a fantastic example, a current example, because they've just released a new version of it with a roof, and it comes with a little Dennis Nedry figure, Dilophosaurus, and I'm going to buy it, but I'm planning to sell the Jeep because I only want the Dennis Nedry figure, because I'm quite happy with the one Jeep of that scale that I have. I feel like it's done once I have that version of it, whereas I don't need other slightly different versions of it, if you know what I mean. I don't need all of them, as long as I have a version that exists, really.
You see, it's interesting, like this discussion about what qualifies as a toy. I was just thinking about those like Jada die-cast rides figures for the movie toys. And they've done like a G1 Optimus figure that it's just the truck, but it's a really detailed die-cast large truck cab of Optimus Prime, non-transforming.
Have you seen it in person?
No, I haven't. I'd actually quite like to see it in person.
They've had it in Forbidden Planet a few times when I've been in it, and it's gorgeous. It just looks beautiful.
It does look really nice. But see, the Optimus Prime collector does collect those kind of things. He does buy like the little die-cast pull-back toys, non-transforming, just almost like Matchbox style figures, Hot Wheels style figures. He does collect those. So that's obviously that level of commitment to Optimus Prime runs pretty deep.
That's all those Tomorrow Never Dies royalties, isn't it?
And also, he's really into Legends class figures. And, there's definitely a degree of completionism going on with that. And that's why we always just like link him to, like, have you got this one? Have you got that one? It's almost like we vicariously want him to achieve this goal. And we're like actively looking and saying like, oh, have you got this one? You should get that one. But
do you think that's interesting in itself? Do you think that identity sort of happens, doesn't it? Where you're like, because I had it for a long time where people are like, oh, you're a masterpiece collector, so you inevitably get tagged in absolutely everything to do with that. M.A.S., you're synonymous for a lot of people, I'm sure, with Diaclone or with vintage variants or whatever it might be. I mean, again, you can't talk about a Jurassic Park Jeep without thinking about Liam. So it's right. You sort of take on that identity almost, don't you? Where people would assume that you have everything, or they would actively, in a funny way, want you to have everything vicariously through you, if that sort of makes sense, because it's that feeling of maybe satisfaction in seeing someone else achieve what they set out to do.
For sure, absolutely. I've taken a lot of enjoyment in having an identity, and sometimes I've struggled to sell toys in the past because I felt like I was sacrificing an online identity that I had established, maybe not even deliberately, but then once it was there, and like, how can I still be the guy who wrote loads of articles about finished Diaclone toys if I don't own any anymore? And have I now
finish?
Oh,
how has that never occurred to you?
I think you've broken.
I think I have. Yeah, it's just that world-weary look that M.A.S. gets when I speak sometimes.
He's edited himself out
He's
of this episode.
choosing his response very carefully, I think.
I don't have the words, so I'm just going to carry on like the bulldozer
move
I
on.
am. Yeah. But yeah, I thought like by selling those toys, am I no longer that person? And then do I, maybe this is slightly immature thinking looking back on it, but like, am I no longer important or relevant? It's really funny actually. When I did sell a whole bunch of toys, there were a bunch of people who no longer were interested in talking to me because I no longer had toys that they were interested in. I could not help them get those toys because I was no longer in that circle. And that was really interesting to see that those dynamics exist in certain parts of the community online too. But yeah,
Wow.
I do think identity is the thing. And I like being referred to as the Juiced Diaclone guy. I don't even know if I am referred to that way. That's how I see myself. That's the collection I really, really want to complete more than anything else. If I was laser focused, I wouldn't be spending money on Mini Spies or Bisque or Studio Series or McDonald's Changeables or Macross or whatever it is this week. I would just keep my money, wait, search, spend all my time searching just for that. So I guess I'm not that much of a completist, really, because I've managed to amass quite a significant vintage G1 collection between the last two Juiced Diaclones that I bought. But yes, identity is definitely a part of it. For some. Some people do it privately and in secret, and they don't share their collection, but they are completists. I know of a G1 and Transformers completist. He doesn't share his collection. He doesn't take part in forums. He's bought a lot of things off me, some of my rarest ever things he's bought. But even he got to the point where he just doesn't know what to do with his storage. He just can't keep up with the number of releases. And I think I can see it's almost like when I say to him, hey, do you want to buy this? It's almost like, yeah, all right. It's a bit like that.
You do see that reaction though from people. That's not too uncommon actually. Like the one that always makes me laugh is when I've had people tag me in about MP10, because I have all the MP10 variants, which is actually something I really enjoy. That's one that I have actively set out to complete. So I guess that answers your question.
Why did you do that?
It's all about the shoes.
Just I enjoy it. I don't know. I there's a thrill of seeing every new version that comes out. I like that they've gone really weird and wacky with particularly the kind of latter ones. Some of the I love the Bapes. They're just very cool. There's a lot about seeing those Bapes in hand that allows you to appreciate them more than just photos, I think, because they're absolutely layered in paint and just actually feel like some of the more quality versions of that mold versus some of the unpainted ones, which are more common. But also I do like that they've kind of gone, sod it, let's just really kind of go out there. And some of the Atmos ones and whatever, I think they're really, really cool. But yeah, I would say it's interesting because I get tagged. People go, oh my god, Sixo's gonna have a heart attack because they're going to do another MP10 and he won't be complete anymore. And I'm like, no, I'm up for it. If they want to do more, cool. Like I like getting these things. So to me, it's not a when they announce a new one, it's more like, I mean, they've teased at least another 4 or 5 of those Atmos MP10s. Bring them on, I say. Like, great.
Another 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Do you foresee a point where you'll be exhausted with how many MP10s you're buying? Like, at any point has it felt like I should probably, instead of I can't wait to?
No, not so far.
Okay.
Not so far, genuinely. And I would say, because that's the discussion, but not so far. I think because they've all been so different. And I think if it was, there are some that they haven't done that I actively would like them to do. So like I would like them to do a blue one, for example, which they never have done for, kind of Power Convoy release. But so for the moment, it's still enjoyable. I guess if it wasn't, it's not something that I feel the need to complete, though. I actually do think I can mentally now say, there's a distinction with this lineup in my brain because I'm enjoying it, so it's cool, and I want them all, but I don't feel the pull of like, I must complete. So actually, if they did do one that I didn't like, I don't think I would find it hard to pass it up.
I think that's healthy.
Yeah, I think with some of the trainer releases, when they first released and I looked at them, I was like, wow, that's kind of out there. And there probably was a moment of like, do I like these? Do I not? Do you know what I mean? And it's not because they're not the most obviously aesthetically pleasing. They're the kind of thing that you almost need to make a decision on of like, is this cool or not cool? And I was like, yeah, no, actually, I do like them. Like, I would be up for that. And that's followed through the duck one that I have in my collection. It's called Duck, but it's bizarre. It's kind of got like a watermelon theme to it. It's like completely non-symmetric, but I dig it. Absolutely love it in hand. It's actually one of my favorites of the MP10s that I have, bizarrely. So yeah, I think it's been really interesting that, but it's interesting, going back to your point, that people do tag me going, oh, you know, Sixo is going to be disappointed that they're doing more, and it's like, no, actually, but I do also see plenty of people that actively don't want new toys made because they don't want that feeling of like, I have to buy it now, which I think is
two sides to it.
Yeah,
I know,
think,
seeing those Titans, so those Legends. And it was part of Titan's Return. Do you remember there was different heads that you could get for Fort Max? And it was done in this molded face of comedians. And they look really weird, but I thought, if I want to be a completist, I've got to track those down. And I think it was at that point that I just I had decided, I actually don't like the way they look, and I'm not going to get them. And then once you've made that decision, it was a freeing. You know, it was like,
I'm glad for you that you made that decision, to be honest, because I mean, look, I'm someone that's like, I can try and see the value in everything, but legitimately, I do think that head, that face that I've seen, it just looks hideous to me anyway. I'm sure someone appreciates it. I know people have it. It's not for me. But yeah, that's a really good example. But I do think that once you get that feeling of obligation, that feeling of like that, as you said, that sigh, that if you see a new toy reveal and you think, ugh, I've got to buy it now, it's time to have a word with yourself at that point. I think is the point, because if you're doing it and it's a slog, it's not worth it. Easy to say. Maybe it's not so easy to do, but.
I do love that community thing, because I just get tagged in pictures of Jurassic Park trainers. That's been my last few weeks.
That was me. I tagged you in that.
I was going to say, I think it was everyone. I loved it. But that's one of the things I love. It's like that day, it was everything on my Twitter was people going, have you seen these? Have you seen these? My WhatsApp messages were, have you seen these? And Facebook, I was even getting text messages.
I do love the have you seen these thing is funny as well. I know Thew jokes about it quite frequently, but I mean, honestly, mood, because I frequently, if there's a new masterpiece reveal or whatever, I get a lot of people tagging me going, have you seen this? It's like, yes, I read the same news sites you do. I have seen it. It's plentiful news that is all over the place.
I've heard of Cybertronic Spree.
Yeah, Cybertronic Spree is the one. Occasionally. Did you know there's this band? Yes, I'm aware. It's just quite funny, but it's nice. You have to take it as a nice thing. That's the thing. I think with all of that, you have to remember people's good intention in it.
Oh, I'm so grateful, because for me, it's how I find out about a lot of stuff. Like with the trainers, it was only because someone had tagged me in it, and I was like, oh my God. And then everyone else who showed it me, it's just more just like, it's just making me sad because I just want them.
Are you going to get the trainers?
I don't know how. These sort of trainers, it was like the Terminator trainers they did. I don't know if you ever saw those. They did the Stompers.
No.
Are you a trainer completist?
No. but they occasionally make these trainers of like pop culture icons that everybody loves. Like the Back to the Future trainers are a fantastic example.
So I can see the appeal in that.
Mm-hmm.
But like in, say, Terminator, when Kyle Reese first turns up, he steals a pair of trainers, and it's very specifically a pair of Nike Vandals, and they're amazing. But then Nike have never made them again until it was a couple of years ago. But they become really difficult to get because they're iconic from these films, aren't they? The same with Reebok. It's the Reebok Stompers, isn't it? From Aliens, which Ripley and Bishop are wearing, these different trainers. And when they release those, they're like, we're finally making them for people. But they're so limited and so difficult to get. They're almost always a store exclusive as well. It's always some store that doesn't exist in this country. Or if they do, they get like 3. And it's just so hard, particularly because you have to get them in your shoe size. Otherwise, you can't wear them.
But that's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. But there will be people out there that are completists of those trainers, as one example. There absolutely will be, and they've got a shelf or a house somewhere with all of that lined up.
One of my best friends, he collects Air Jordans, and I've known him for about 20 years at this point, and ever since he's always bought them. It just has massive piles of boxes of them, and he buys every single one, and it looks incredible. And so you get that. Also, random fact, you get yellowing on trainers as well. You know, like we talk about with Transformers.
Mhm.
Okay.
In fact, yeah, I noticed this when I was looking to re-buy a pair of Reebok pumps, basketball pumps that I had as a kid, because they reissued them. God, the parallels are amazing, and the reissues are obviously like bony white. But I looked at a few vintage ones as well, and they had yellowed.
Yeah,
My God.
that's what happens. I pulled out last year. I pulled out some Air Jordans that were in a box, and they've been there for about 4 years. And it didn't even occur to me. And I pulled it out, and all the little plastic had gone yellow, and even the rubber soles, the clear rubber soles had just gone yellow, and it's so disheartening. That is a scourge. That is.
Well, he does look like a pair of shoes, Scourge. So.
The flying slipper.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I couldn't not.
We're talking about stuff that we complete. I have very regularly looked at things that I thought were finite and I could complete. Like Transformers GT was a line that I thought I could complete, and I think I did.
4 toys.
Yeah, but then it wasn't 4 toys. It was
yeah, sorry.
The Safety Prime. Yeah. And then they did a die-cast toy as well under the Transformers GT. And then, as if that wasn't enough, there was a bunch of manga that you could get in various magazines and posters and giveaways and flyers at shows. And it's like, I just realized that I'm never going to get all this stuff. And then I, tried to be a completist about the hot rod mold. Can I get all the different hot rods? And that's been a thing as well. So,
where's the pink one?
Well, yeah, I'm never going to get that one. Although, funnily enough, I did ask the person who owns it this week if they would consider selling it. I just wanted to know.
I legit thought this was going to be your moment where you go, I had that. I owned that.
I never did. I did handle it. I did see it in person, but I never did own it.
But it is astonishing, isn't it? When you think about even like a line so small of 4 toys, and then suddenly there are these pain in the arse exclusives that suddenly appear and become difficult. And even then it sort of puts you off, doesn't it?
Yeah. And then what if the test shop pops up on eBay? What if you know the person who has the artwork for it? The original box art. Or what if you see a transparency for its original box photography? Where does it stop? It is like we said right at the very beginning, completism does have parameters, and you're the one who sets those parameters.
Yeah. But do you think those exclusives, or do you think that hard to find nature, do you think that is enough to turn you off collecting any of that stuff to begin with? Because I'll give you an example, and it's like I'm thinking, okay, so if you couldn't have found that 5th GT bit, would that have negated your enjoyment of the other 4 cars, as one example? And then the one I was thinking of is I actually saw a post today, and again, it's a recent, it's a War for Cybertron example, Generations, and it was talking about all the exclusives, because I think what's happening now is that the exclusives thing used to be something that kind of more what's the kind of word I'm looking for? More, I don't want to say serious collectors, but more like people that are more deep into the hobby. That used to be a challenge for them, exclusives, finding that, all of that. But actually what's happened now is the exclusives have crept into the main line, because they release stuff that's very hard to find. And so the one, stuff like the Ironhide and Ratchet 2-pack, the Autobot Alliance 2-pack that was done, which a lot of people cannot find, or it's on eBay or retail stores for $250. It's kind of it's a ridiculous sum of money for 2 War for Cybertron toys. It's kind of, I have them in hand, and no way is it worth that amount of money. Let's be fair, not from a materials point of view or anything. But I have seen people saying I cannot get hold of that 2-pack, so I think I'm done with War for Cybertron, and they're swearing off collecting the rest of the line on the basis that they cannot get this one thing, or I'm sure it's more than that, because it might be several exclusives. I think this is a recurring theme with those exclusives, that they're kind of annoying people.
Well, we've mentioned it several times tonight, haven't we? Just like with Thrust as well, and I think we mentioned it with Blue Streak recently, and he's popped up for like £15, hasn't he now? Sort of in bulk in this country. But
do you think it sort of disappoints people to the point where they're like, actually, this is not even worth going in on the toys that I can get?
I think so, because it flies in the face of goal-based collecting satisfaction. And if you are a goal-based collector and you get your satisfaction from meeting those goals, and you realize that this is then unachievable, maybe you'll just focus on another area that is achievable, because that hit and that satisfaction that comes from completing, you can see it happening within your means and within what makes sense to you.
it confronts you, doesn't it, with that disappointment of knowing how difficult it is to complete stuff as well. And when it repeatedly happens, like in those cases with Generations, and it's just a lot of hurdles, it can just weigh you down a little bit. Like you can almost fall out of love with this, and that's what all this comes back to, isn't it? You buy these for the first place because you love them, and then when it just becomes hard and you just constantly hit in the face with this sort of, oh, it's so difficult and expensive, and then you're disappointed, and it puts a different spin on it. So even when you do get it, you spend so much money on it, it can't quite live up to the sort of hope you had for it in the first place.
Definitely. And I think that's why it is disappointing that there are now so many exclusives in War for Cybertron or in the mainline, because there are people, you know, whether they're more casual collectors or whatever, there are people that are experiencing that, you know, in a way, just a kind of like dipping their toe in the hobby and getting that sense of frustration. And I feel like that's perhaps a little bit unfair. Do you know what I mean? That's not the way to encourage people further into the hobby, by giving them that challenge straight off the bat. You know, it just seems a bit unnecessary maybe. But on the other hand, one thing I did think was interesting about Unicron, the new Unicron, was that they were originally going to badge it as Generation Selects, and they changed it because they realized quite rightly that it would frustrate people that wanted a complete Generation Selects collection, and that if it was called Generation Selects, you would never have that if you didn't get the Unicron. And I think fair play to them for making that realization.
Yeah, and if they're acknowledging the fact that collecting can go hand in hand with completism, that it's definitely a thing, and it's you know, it's obviously on their mind when they, whereas, you know, they could quite easily have gone the other way and sort of almost made people get it who were compelled to have complete collections.
Man, that would have
but
been
it's still a War for
ultimate
Cybertron toy, isn't it? It's still War for Cybertron. If you're a War for Cybertron completist, I guess that ticks the box.
Oh no, I was just going to say, it's actually come up a few times, hasn't it, where they've said, well, if you look in the past, they'd put out, say, one Headmaster character, wouldn't they? In sort of 2006, 2010, you'd maybe get like a giant hardhead, none of the others, because it's not a team. But now they pop up in interviews and they say they are going to complete the teams. If they've done some of them, they'll go back and do the others. And they did that recently with the Horrorcons, didn't they? Where they released one, and then Snapdragon came much later. But they only did that because they knew people wanted to complete it.
So that means Sure Shot and Point Blank can't be that far away.
They have to be. They do. There's no way they can't do those toys. And they have molds that fit them perfectly.
Yeah, I'd love to see what they choose with Point Blank. That's a really special toy in just about every incarnation it's had.
Have you seen the Counterpunch toy?
Yes. Yeah. I really like the way that looks.
And that's definitely, it's so Point Blank as well. You can, with the shoulders, the way they point out, it's so much of it looks like that toy.
Destroyers from deep space.
I feel like we're complete on the topic. Yep, someone had to say it. But I think it is a really interesting one. I think it's a great discussion, and I think it kind of taps into so many different areas of what it means to be a collector, what it, the kind of parameters that you set for yourself. And I suppose more importantly, the weight that you put on yourself as well, like the responsibility or the kind of burden that you kind of put on your own shoulders. And I think that is the kind of thing that I'm, if anything, taking away from this whole discussion, is that you really don't need to do that. You know, you don't need to give yourself that. It's good to have challenge and it's good to have goals, but you don't need to give yourself that feeling of obligation. And that is it's an impediment to enjoyment, really.
But also, we should completely acknowledge the collectors who get a kick out of it. And that is the way that they derive the most enjoyment of completing a line. And I know I've tried to complete enough lines that it is definitely a thing for me. I do try to complete lines, especially where I see they're achievable. And on the very few occasions that I have managed it, I mean, I haven't even completed 1984. At no point of my 20 plus years in this hobby have I had all of 1984 G1 at the same time, or 85, or 86, or 87, or any year. Plenty of G1 I've never owned. I think that Transformers GT line was the closest I'd ever gotten to finishing something completely. I mean,
it's going to be Bisque. It's going to be Bisque.
Well, that's the thing. Like, someone has offered me a particular Bisque toy, which is just an international release of the version I have on the way, and I'm just thinking, like, do I do it? You know, like, am I gonna be a Bisque completist? Do I want to be the person who's known for being a Bisque? Am I just doing this for fun? Am I
Complete
just want to
Bisque.
take right? That's the thing. Like, but I know I'll enjoy it if I do it. So we should also remember that there is a positive aspect to this as well, and it gives people a goal, it gives them a hobby, it gives them a motivation, it gives them something to look forward to that they can always take happiness in. So if at any point it sounds like we're kind of casting shade on that approach, it's definitely not the case, because I see it in
100%.
myself.
I think as long as
do
you're
it myself.
Yeah, same. I think as long as you're enjoying it, it's all good.
Yeah, and as you can tell, like all three of us have very different ideas on what completionist is, don't you? And that goes for everyone. And you define your own collection by that, don't you? What you want to get out of it.
We now return to the Transformers.
That brings us to the end of episode 7. Thank you again for joining us. We are continuously knocked out by the amount of positive comments we get from people who listen to the podcast, even those who can't quite get on board with the fact that it's 2+ hours long every other week. But thank you for listening. Thank you for your positive comments. We read every single one, and I've been saving every single one. So please keep listening, keep in touch, keep telling us what you think of the episodes, mention things you think we didn't mention, bring it up. It's always great for discussion. We do try to start threads on topics that we're doing podcasts about, and we love hearing from you, and often we'll drop in stuff that we've seen and mention it on the podcast.
I would add to that. I just really want to say that I think on behalf of all of us, thank you for listening, and you complete us.
Ooh.
Until next time. No. You've ruined it completely, you bastard. Totally derailed me.
Completely killed it.
He's been waiting to do that all night. I'm going to have to do that whole thing again.
And it was so perfectly just fitted in.
Okay, I'll tell you what. If you dare, do it again on my retake of this.
Can you not just go from after I say you complete us?
Okay. And no more on that later. But lads, social media, where can they find you? Sixo.
I am at Sixo TF, and I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram,
at dad jokes.
YouTube. Yeah, plenty of dad jokes. That's it. Look me up for dad jokes.
Liam.
I can be found at Toybox Soapbox on an incomplete list of social media places like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Bebo, was that a thing? Have I made that joke before?
Yes.
I think I have.
This was a variant.
Twice.
You can find me at TFsquareone. That's one word on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And also you can follow Triple Takeover at _takeover on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure as always. See you next time.